Good afternoon. My name is Sunil Kumar, and I have the privilege of serving as the provost of Johns Hopkins University. Thank you for attending today's town hall. Over the last few months, the Johns Hopkins University and the Johns Hopkins Medicine Vice President for Public Safety, Branville Bard, has met with faculty, staff, and student groups to introduce himself, share some of his experiences leading progressive public safety efforts and building community trust, and discuss his vision for public safety at Johns Hopkins. I joined a few of these meetings, and I would like to thank everyone who participated for their thoughtful engagement. Today, as high rates of violent crime near our campuses and across the city continue to affect the lives of so many, we want to ensure you have the opportunity to ask questions of Dr. Bard and to discuss the university's comprehensive approach to public safety, including pairing behavioral health providers with public safety officers to respond to behavioral health crises, a program that the university announced last spring, the university's ongoing community investments, anti-violence programs led by Baltimore City, and collaborative efforts such as the Jsu Innovation Fund for community safety. The university and Dr. Bard are committed to an open and transparent process as we take the next steps in ensuring public safety at Hopkins. It is a pleasure to welcome such a thoughtful and responsible leader as Dr. Branville Bard to address this town hall. He joined Johns Hopkins last summer after serving as the police commissioner for the city of Cambridge, Massachusetts. He has nearly 3 decades of experience in law enforcement and public safety. He holds a doctorate in public administration with an emphasis on criminal justice policy and a master's degree in both public safety management and criminal justice. The focus of today's town hall is to discuss public safety on the Homewood, Peabody, and other central Baltimore campuses, and our efforts to ensure that we all feel safe at work and at school. There is another virtual town hall scheduled for Thursday, May 5th from 12 to 1 p.m., where the focus will be on public safety on the East Baltimore campus. We encourage you to attend that town hall as well. Before I turn things over to Dr. Bard, I would like to briefly introduce the remainder of today's panelists. We have Ed Schlesinger, who's the Benjamin T. Rome Dean of the Whiting School of Engineering and Professor of Electrical and Computer Engineering. We have Alicia Wilson, Vice President for Economic Development at Johns Hopkins University and Johns Hopkins Health System. We have Fred Bronstein, the Dean of Johns Hopkins Peabody Institute. We have Kofi Afori, who is the Senior Associate Dean for Finance and Administration at the Krieger School of Arts and Sciences. We have Hunter Gelbach, Professor and Vice Dean for Academic Affairs at the Johns Hopkins School of Education, and Chris Bauman, who's the Associate Dean for Finance and Administration at the Carey Business School. We also have with us an analyst from the Public Safety Office who will walk you through the data dashboard as we go through the process, Sarah Gaylord. So thank you all for joining, and over to you, Branville.
Provost Kumar, thank you very much. This afternoon, we're obviously focusing on crime and safety as it impacts our university campuses and the surrounding areas. Recently, we've had some low-frequency, high-impact events. These are the type of things that don't happen often, but when they do, they tear at the very foundation of our feelings of safety. And we've also been plagued with steady and sometimes serious crime that routinely unfolds around us. We know that the main factor determining neighborhood satisfaction is a perception of neighborhood safety. And we know that the people who work, study, and teach here also live nearby and everywhere throughout the city. So Hopkins has to take the approach that we must worry about the safety of the entire city. And to that end, Johns Hopkins heavily invests and supports efforts to reduce violence in Baltimore. Hopkins financially supports programs like Mayor Scott's Group Violence Reduction Strategy, which uses a focused deterrence model to intercept violence, and programs like ROCA, whose mission is to break the cycle of poverty and incarceration. Hopkins has created the Jsu Innovation Fund, which is a 4-year, $6 million program for community-led safety efforts. In fact, the university has had a long-standing commitment to reducing violence and crime in Baltimore, and we're committed to doing all within our power to improve our situation on our campuses right now. The public safety apparatus here at Johns Hopkins is substantial. It consists of more than 1,200 team members, including unarmed campus police officers, unarmed campus security officers, and unarmed contract security officers. We employ off-duty officers from Baltimore City Police and the Sheriff's Office. We work with Bpd to address violence when it occurs. Commissioner Harrison and his team are very responsive. I have nothing but the highest compliments for the district majors and captains with whom we work daily. We stay in constant communication. Together we shift patrol resources, security forces for JSU, and together we engage in relentless investigatory follow-up when crimes do occur. Our investigators have had recent successes assisting BPD in acquiring arrest warrants and making arrests on several recent Homewood and Charles Village robberies. Additionally, our investigators did the field work resulting in the identification and arrest of a campus peeping Tom. We work collaboratively with BPD. We employ BPD sheriff officers in an off-duty capacity, but the fact remains that these resources will always be deployed where they're most needed throughout the city, which often draws them away from our campuses. The university has looked to shore up this vulnerability by establishing dedicated resources in the form of a small, publicly accountable university police department, like those that exist at all of our regional peers. And because of several recent high-profile events, I've heard many renewed calls for the swift creation of the Johns Hopkins Police Department. And we fully recognize the urgency of the current situation and have taken steps to deploy additional public safety resources to the areas that are most needed. But I have to remind everyone that the university committed to pausing the creation of the JHPD, and the university is committed to adhering to that pause. And although the pause effectively ends next month, the university is committed to doing this right, not fast. So the end of the pause will not equate to immediate patrols by JHPD officers. In fact, there will be much work that's required between the time the pause ends and patrols by JHPD officers can begin. That's why we planned for, and the legislation called for, a multi-year, multi-phase public implementation process. An important next step in that implementation process is establishing an MOU with the Baltimore City Police Department. The law requires that once negotiated, that MOU must be posted publicly for comment and town hall discussions before it's finalized. And we're committed to ensuring that that MOU process is transparent and open to the community. And given the amount and nature of work to be done, and the fact that students, staff, and neighborhood groups won't be largely available during the summer, public discussions of that MOU are going to begin next fall. This is going to ensure that there's ample opportunities for community engagement and public input throughout that process. This will ensure that the new members of the JHPD Accountability Board can be acclimated and fully engaged in their important legislative duties. Once that MOU process is completed, then we'll work with a consultant to ensure that we develop policies that value the sanctity of human life above all else, develop training that's consistent with those values and helps us to avoid occurrences of racial injustices, and develop infrastructure in terms of personnel, facilities, and equipment. There's much work that will still need to be done once we exit the pause. We take seriously the responsibility entrusted to us by the legislature, our neighbors, and community leaders to create a university police department that embodies the ideals of 21st century policing. To do this right, it's going to take continual community engagement and input. The university and I are committed to ensuring that it's done in a meaningful way, one that helps us to realize a campus that's safer and at the same time welcoming to all. So again, I thank you for attending, and I'll answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Gaylord, and I'm the Crime Data Analyst for Johns Hopkins Public Safety. I wanted to thank you for taking the time today to attend the town hall and use this opportunity to demonstrate to you one of the many resources available on our public safety website. To provide our Hopkins affiliates and community members with an additional public safety resource, we've created an interactive dashboard to provide users with a visualization and overview of crime and incidents reported in and around our Baltimore campuses and throughout the city of Baltimore. The information provided in the dashboard is publicly available information based off our public safety crime logs and the Open Baltimore Bpd Part 1 victim-based crime dataset. The information is also a one-year rolling period of reported crime and incidents, and no personal identifying information is included. The dashboard can be found through the Johns Hopkins Public Safety website at publicsafety.jhu.edu under the Compliance and Crime Stats tab. At this time, I will walk you through a brief demonstration on how to use the dashboard. When the dashboard opens, it will default to the Public Safety Crime Log dataset. There are a couple different ways users can view the data information. The first option is simply clicking on a data point. The information that pops up is the same information that can be found on our campus safety crime logs, such as the crime type, a case number, the date and time the incident occurred and was reported, a general location, a campus vicinity, and the disposition of the case. The second option of viewing the data is using the selection tool. Choose the selection tool and select the type of tool you would like to use to select the data points. Zoom into an area of an interest to you and simply draw around the data points in order to highlight that data set. Next, you will open up the attribute table, and from here, you can select Show Selected Records. From here, it will give you the same information, although now it is similar to that of a spreadsheet format. Although it looks as though only 10 data points were selected, the table actually shows there were 43 incidents that occurred in that area. And the reason for that is because there can be one location that may have multiple incidents that have occurred there. Therefore, there are dots on top of dots on top of dots. The user will also have the ability to export this information into a CSV file if they would like to view it through an Excel spreadsheet as well. The third option to view the data is by using the filter tool. Up in the left-hand corner, if you click on the Johns Hopkins logo, the user has the option to filter the data based on any or all of the search criteria below. Some of the options include the campus vicinity, a crime type, a date range, or a case number. So for example, if you're interested in specifically the Homewood campus and would like to see some of the burglaries reported within the last rolling year period, once you've selected your criteria, the information will be highlighted in purple to indicate those are the incidents that match the criteria you've selected. The information for each data point will be shown on the left-hand side, similar to a list view. The user can still view the information in an attribute table and still be able to export the information to a CSV. To view the Bpd data, you simply change your selected layer from the campus crime logs and select the Bpd Part 1 victim-based crime. Again, with the Bpd data, you do have the option to select your data points the same way I just showed you for the campus crime logs. With the Bpd dataset, it is broken down into 3 categories. The blue dots represent the property crime, the red dots represent violent crime, and the green dots represent common assault. Once again, you can either click on the data point to see the information. You can use the selection tool in order to select an area of data points you would like to look at. Or the third option is, again, using the filter tool. This time, there is a Bpd filter option. And when you click on the Bpd logo, you again have the ability to filter the data by any or all of the criteria listed below. For example, a crime type, a crime category, a date range, a weapon, district, and even a neighborhood. Again, the user can export that information into a CSV file. We have also included an FAQ section to help walk users through how to navigate the dashboard if you are not familiar with the platform. We also have direct links to the campus crime logs, as well as a link to our annual security report. The dashboard is also viewable and user-friendly on a tablet or smartphone. And again, the dashboard can be located on our public safety website at publicsafety.jhu.edu under the Clients and Crime Stats tab. I will turn it back over to Alicia for the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Excellent presentation by you and both Dr. Bard. And it's my pleasure to get to moderate a Q&A with all of you on the questions that you posted previously, but also those that you are posting live on the website. So feel free to continue to interact, to post questions, and I will make sure that all of your questions are answered during this live broadcast. I want to start really and pick up right where Sarah left off, Dr. Bard, and ask this question, which was posed, which is, we saw all those dots on the screen, and someone posted that, what kind of follow-ups are occurring on the crimes that are relayed to all of us via email? Is there any way that we would be able to receive resolution information on those investigations?
That's a great question. I just want to stress that we liaison and communicate with BPD and engage in relentless follow-up on all of these crimes. And we do that in real time, and we do that through their daily crime bulletins. We adjust and shift resources as necessary. When it comes to updates on those investigations, BPD controls those updates largely. I mentioned the fact that we had recent success in assisting BPD in acquiring arrest warrants and making arrests in several recent robberies, 3 that occurred in the month of April alone. But what they can share and what we can share is sometimes limited, because sometimes we'll have an arrest warrant for a job that occurred, but we don't want to broadcast that because we haven't taken a suspect into custody yet, or taken one suspect into custody when there may be several others. So we're sometimes limited by what we can say and what we can divulge based on the nature that it may compromise our ability to affect an arrest on an investigation. So with that being said, we routinely, and I mean, as a matter of course, on a daily basis, communicate with the district majors and captains and make sure that we're putting our resources where the needs are most during those times.
Thank you for that. This question really is posed, you in your remarks, you talked about that there would be a time after the pause between when a police force would be fully implemented. But the question is about when they are fully implemented, will these officers have the authority to apprehend suspects? Someone noted that currently they note that the security can call 911, but can't really apprehend anyone. Will there be a change when the new officers come on?
Yes, so that's a common misperception. So right now we have a unarmed campus police department, and they do have statutory powers of arrest, but they're unarmed. And we have security officers who are a force multiplier through an observe and report function that they serve. But the JHPD will be sworn law enforcement officers who are armed, and they'll have full law enforcement responsibilities. They'll share those responsibilities with the Baltimore Police Department through the 3 campus areas designated by the legislature. So yes, there'll be full-fledged university police officers who, quite frankly, will have more time to do investigative work than our counterparts in BPD has, because we'll have a limited focus of the campus environment.
Now, speaking of the campus environment, this next question posed is about, will officers patrol the East Baltimore parking garages, those being Caroline, McElderry, Washington, Orleans Street? Will that be something that will be added on as a part of the implementation?
They will be. The Orleans garage sits right in the footprint of the JHPD patrol zone. And I just want to stress right now that we continually assess the needs at our parking garages. I want to stress that they're not only patrolled physically by security officers, but we also have virtual patrols where we are able to view what's going on in real time in the garage settings. So we work with facilities to make sure that the areas are clean and conducive to safety, and that we are providing a presence in all of our garages.
Excellent. I'd love to pivot for a second to the question that's a few questions that have been posed about escorts, and that there's a policy of being able to call for an escort to walk you to your car. The first one's going to talk about geography. So one person asked the question is, will that be extended to Peabody? They noted that Peabody was not included among the campuses for security escort services. Will that be added on at some point in the very near future?
It certainly will be. And as the JHPD is established, there's a Peabody patrol zone as well.
Excellent. The other question was really about the safety of the escort. So this person said they call for an escort, but they feel like both of us are at risk. So they're just as vulnerable as the person who called for the car since they aren't armed. Is there any thought process about the safety of the escort and the efficiency of that policy?
So that's an excellent question. And yes, our security officers are unarmed, but it goes back to the old adage or the principle that there's safety in numbers. So if you have to be out late, I would encourage you to call for the escort. Let us get you to your spot, and then we'll manage our ways back to our campuses and our facilities. But it's safety in numbers is the principle. So we prefer to escort you. When in doubt, just call for the escort.
Excellent. This question is really about yellow vest security personnel, and that might not be their title, but that's how they're referred to in this question that I'm about to pose, which is, what is the plan for those who we may observe wearing yellow vest security, yellow vests that are in the security operation? Are they going to be are they viewed as an effective part of the security operation going forward? And will those individuals become employees of Hopkins?
So yeah, that's a both and. So what we'll do is we'll always constantly assess and reevaluate our needs. When we establish the JHPD, there may be some changes with our security and our contract security programs, but we'll still maintain contract security officers. They're an effective force multiplier when you understand that their purpose is to observe and report. I think sometimes we're confused and think that they're supposed to intervene physically, and they're not. Their responsibility is to observe and report to the appropriate entities. So as we establish the JHPD and have visible patrols from the police department, we'll, as we always do, constantly assess our needs and locations for the, as you call them, yellow vests or our security officers.
Excellent. And everyone, thank you for continuing to put your questions in the chat. I'm receiving all of them and are incorporating them into this conversation, but continue to do that, and I'll continue to insert them into the conversation right now. In that respect, I want to pivot to a couple of questions about shuttle service. And this question is about, will there be an increase in security and safe shuttle options at the Homewood campus? And maybe let's just broaden it, because I know that so many are watching from other campuses. Will there be an increase in safe and shuttle options given recent activity?
So what I'll say to that is that what predates me is that there was already a plan in place to augment shuttle services throughout our campuses, and it was kind of derailed by COVID. So at some point, we'll reevaluate those plans and begin an implementation phase to augment the shuttle services throughout all of our campuses.
Excellent. There's a particular question about one of the campuses, our downtown campus at the Candler building. Are there plans for a security around that that location, which is Marketplace, Pratt Street, right in sort of the CBD?
Yes, and we've been talking to community groups, and so it's part of our structure, it's part of our facilities, and so we have a vested interest in maintaining security there, and we already have a presence, but we can make sure that presence is as visible as possible.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. The question, and we had Provost Kumar talk about the many different complements to the public safety portfolio, and this question is about the crisis response team. Will that team be a complement to the public safety portfolio? And they really call out, will there be sort of EMTs or psychologists who can deal with trauma that accompany the police or accompany that response?
So yes, the behavioral health crisis support team, its purpose is to make sure that you have trained clinical individuals respond to individuals in the throes of a mental health crisis, and not public safety or security alone. So what we have is a co-response model. We piloted it in November, and so you have a trained clinician, and in addition to an unarmed public safety officer who responds to incidents where individuals are in the throes of a mental health crisis, and that clinician takes the lead in those situations. They if it's beyond the scope of something that can have immediate need help, they can help immediately, then they make the appropriate referral so that the individual can get ongoing care. As we have now onboarded more clinicians, it piloted at Homewood, and now we're in the process of, with student services, expanding that program throughout all of our campuses. I believe Peabody is next, and then East Baltimore. So it's a valuable program. I think we've long understood the need that police and public safety aren't the best individuals to send when someone's in the throes of a mental health crisis. And I really applaud the university for undertaking that alternate response.
Excellent. This quick question is about some of the analysis that Sarah was able to do. And this is just a high level question. Are you evaluating where those hotspots, we saw where there were, as Sarah pointed out, sort of clusters, are, and planning preventive measures as a part of the response?
We continually evaluate where those hotspots are. It's a function, a routine function of what we are required to do to provide public safety. One of the problems is that our counterparts in Bpd end up in a situation where they're effectively chasing dots and going to the hot spot of the day because they have, it's no secret that they have diminished resources right now. So in addition to the load of responding to going from call to call to call, they're also going from priority of the moment, priority of the day, priority of right now. So that's one of the problems with us utilizing Bpd in the fashion that we do in the sheriffs, because they're continually pulled away from our campus areas to where the need is most prevalent throughout the city. And that's why the university sought to, several years ago, establish a small publicly accountable police department so we can have those dedicated resources here. And we believe that once we have dedicated resources here, then we'll recognize all kinds of benefits, from decreased response times to more accountability on the public safety officers who work here, and higher level of engagement with our stakeholders, because the JHPD officers will only have you to focus on.
That's a really great question. That's going to pivot me to the question, a few questions that we've been posed around the use of Baltimore Police Department officers post the pause, right? And so this is once implementation occurs. Is Hopkins not going to be tapping into Bpd and recruiting from their ranks? Will we be recruiting independently of the ranks of Baltimore Public Police Department? The question is really framed around, if we take the best from Bpd, who do we leave them with? So how are we thinking about that?
So you asked a couple of questions there. The first part was, once the JHPD is established, will we still be using BPD? So, and we need to remember that there's going to be a phased implementation of the JHPD. So we won't go from 0 to a full complement of officers. So it always will have to be a phased overlay approach where we phase in JHPD officers, assess our situation, and then make adjustments as we go along. As far as us depleting BPD of its resources, I've spoken at great length with Commissioner Harrison, and we're in agreement as to how not to ensure that we don't do that. So, you know, we've spoken and we agree on that that's something that we need to be very intentional about not doing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The question that sort of parlays off of that is, anyone who might be recruited into a JHPD, how will they be trained in JHU policies and procedures? How is there? Have you given any thought to how that might occur? You know, once you begin implementation.
Sure. So, you know, in a perfect world, I'll get the best and brightest individuals from the city of Baltimore, and I'll train them in how to serve, you know, our stakeholders. What that means, what it actually looks like practically, is that they'll have to go to a state certified academy like the one BPD puts on, and they'll spend the better part of 6 months in that academy learning policy, procedures, and state laws. Once they leave that academy and are certified full-fledged officers, then we'll bring them to Hopkins and put them through a smaller academy where we train them in a Hopkins way and how we expect them to interact and treat, you know, our stakeholders. Our goal is always to make sure that this campus is safer, but it has to feel welcoming to all. And, you know, that's going to be a key point that we stress, and making sure that we get the best and the brightest and we give them the best training. I've always believed that well-trained individuals make better decisions, and, you know, we're going to make sure that we have the highest degree of training and instill a culture in our officers that we want the rest of law enforcement to model.
Yeah. Let me ask you 2 more questions on this point. I want to make sure that I get all the questions in that have been posed, which is, could you talk a little bit about the oversight of JHPD officers once hired? Will there be public, student oversight? How will sort of all of those values that you just talked about be reinforced within oversight of that force?
So one of the things that I was really excited about was the fact that the Community Safety and Strengthening Act, it overlaid all of these accountability measures, from establishing the JHPD Accountability Board, which is a guide arm and policy practice, and they get to review all metrics as they relate to crime and racial data and complaint data. The JHPD won't have state immunity, which in and of itself raises the cost of bad behavior. The JHPD is subject to the state mandated complaint process. The JHPD falls under the jurisdiction of the city, which the Baltimore City Civilian Review Board. And now, as the Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights has been repealed substantively, the JHPD Hearing Board will have the ability to have more civilian input into the disciplinary process. So the Community Safety and Strengthening Act did a wonderful job of in instilling and overlaying all of these accountability measures, from limiting the size of JHPD to limiting the footprint of JHPD. And then the university is committed to, you know, having further measures of accountability on top of those that we see as a floor and not the ceiling.
Yeah. This question, I want to shift a little bit to a number of questions about campus incidents and off-campus incidents, particularly about armed and unarmed. So this first question, I on this topic is about in the campus security email messages that are routinely sent out, many suspects had handguns. You mentioned that members of JHU's police are unarmed. A part of the security team are unarmed. How is the unarmed aspect dealing with that? The fact that many of the suspects that people are encountering are armed.
I'm sorry, you kind of lost me a little bit. You said, how is our unarmed force effective against armed individuals?
Correct.
So where we are most effective at is obviously we liaison with Bpd, who provide an armed response, but our investigatory follow-up. We review footage and track down leads. And once again, we have time to do that. Our investigators have time to do that our counterparts at Bpd may not have to devote, because how they're being called to incident after incident and homicide after homicide and shooting victim after shooting victim. So we get the time to drill down and do virtual patrols and locate suspects on their way to commit the act, while they're committing the act, and as they escape from the act. And then we are able to turn that information over to BPD, and it results in effective arrest and arrest warrants, being made and arrest warrants being issued. And of the robberies that we've had at the Homewood campus and Charles Village during the month of April, we successfully did that, and were able to work with BPD on 3 occasions to effect an arrest.
One question, and this question is about emails that I think this may be a professor. I'm not sure who the person speaking might be, but between robberies at gunpoint, armed carjackings, many students are talking about not feeling safe. And then maybe could we go a step further? Are there new proactive public safety measures that are on the horizon, being implemented, being considered for implementation around sort of the carjacking as well as the robberies at gunpoint?
Absolutely. And once again, we continually are reviewing, our response capabilities. One of the things that we look to do is always enhance our ability to respond technologically. So we review, and we're in the process of, at the university and in the medical system, of evaluating our ability to our camera placement and our ability to make sure that we can investigate issues using technology. We're adding cameras daily at the Homewood campus, at Peabody, and then in East Baltimore as a normal process. And then we want to make sure that those cameras are actually capable of providing identifying information, such as able to capture license plates and get clear pictures of individuals and not blurry images. So we're continually looking to increase our technological capabilities to help assist for those incidents when we can't be physically present.
Absolutely. Let me get this question and continue. I want to continue to tell people that we're still accepting questions, and I'm seeing all of them that are coming in, incorporating them into this conversation, but you're welcome to continue to put questions in the chat. This question comes from someone who wants to ask this question about on-campus crime. How will the JHPD address crime committed or allegedly committed by Hopkins students, more specifically sexual assault, use of illegal drugs? How will JHPD respond to those crimes committed or allegations of crimes being committed?
It depends on a case-by-case basis. We have officers who are already charged with investigating incidents of sexual assault. And in most of those cases, you'll find a joint investigation being conducted, where our Title IX office will conduct its investigation. And then what will happen is that the BPD in this case, and then when the JHPD is established, the JHPD may investigate separately the criminal allegation because of the different levels of proof and the scope of those investigations. So you'll probably what you'll see in those incidents, you'll have a dual investigation, one carried out by the institutional agency responsible for whatever that violation is, whether it be sexual assault or a conduct violation, and then where criminal allegations are made, then the JHPD or BPD conducting a separate investigation.
Excellent. I want to pivot for a second to the questions about officer accountability. Again, sort of forecasting when JHPD is fully operational, but also reflecting upon observations that some have now. How will officer accountability be enforced? And this is specifically sort of, if an officer is on his or her post, maybe looking down at their phone, not observing the surroundings, will there be mechanisms for there to be accountability around just being on the post and being observant during
So yeah, I've seen that complaint before where one of our, as you referred to earlier in a question, one of our yellow vests, one of our security officers who are on a post are preoccupied by looking at an electronic device. What the current mechanisms that we have in place is that we have supervisors assigned to sectors, and those supervisors ride around and provide guidance and ensure that officers are conducting themselves appropriately and intervene when they find officers who aren't. Is it a perfect system? I'm not going to say that, but we do have mechanisms in place already to check on and keep those individuals accountable.
This question is about the demographics of the police force. How will there be are you thinking about, and I know the answer to this, so I'm sort of trying to preface it in a way so I can get the answer and get a fulsome answer from you, Dr. Bard. But how are you thinking about the demographics of the police force? How are you thinking about them in all respects, from Black officers, your racially diverse officers of different that have different identities, officers that are local? How are you thinking about the demographics and really creating a diverse team of officers that become a part of the JHPD?
So we definitely want to make sure that the department is reflective of the community that we serve in every way, shape, and form. The legislation requires that 25% of the JHPD be residents of Baltimore within 5 years' time, and but I certainly see that as a floor and not a ceiling. I want to make sure that we provide these great public safety jobs to as many local young people as possible. The JHPD Accountability Board is going to help us to review all of our hiring metrics to make sure that we're, recruiting and getting a diverse population. But it's going to be reflective of the community that we serve, both locally and ensuring that we get, individuals who represent all communities, from the LGBTQ plus community to underrepresented minorities, women. We're going to make sure that we're diverse and truly reflective of the community that we serve.
And this question is really focused on how are you thinking about the pause? And we know that at the outset you talked about the pause, really concluding on July 1st, 2022. How are you thinking about make sense of the shift that we are in now from 2020 sort of reckoning to now being back on track with the decision? How are you processing it? How are you thinking about it? Can you have any reflections on coming out of the pause and what that means for us as an institution?
Yeah, and I kind of touched on it in my remarks, but I just wanted to level set because I'm getting all of this pressure and these renewed calls to JHPD now. And I just want to make sure that I level set and make sure that folks are aware that once the pause ends, there's a lot of work that needs to be done before you'll even see the first JHPD officer on patrol. As I outlined, the next step has to be that MOU process. So we have to enter into agreement with the Baltimore City Police Department, and then there has to be a public process that's delineated in the Community Safety and Strengthening Act, where it has to be posted publicly, and then that MOU, we have to have town halls and get public input surrounding the MOU. Once that process plays out, which won't even begin until the fall, because like I said, we understand that the pause ends in, let's say, July 1st, but most of our stakeholders aren't going to be available, whether it be students, staff, or the community group. So that process isn't even going to begin in earnest until the fall. Once that process plays out, however long it takes, and once again, we're committed to doing it right, not doing it fast. So however long that process takes, then we have to engage in building the infrastructure for a JHPD, which, you know, is personnel metrics, facilities, equipment, and policies have to be developed. The JHPD Accountability Board will be instrumental in reviewing all of our policies. So it's a lot of work that needs to be done between when that pause ends and when you'll see a JHPD officer. We want to get it done, and we want to, you know, shore up that aspect of our public safety team. But even still, the JHPD is just going to be a small, although vital, part of what we consider, you know, a comprehensive strategy for public safety that, as Provost Kumar alluded to, even includes behavioral health clinicians and experts. So small part of a comprehensive public safety effort.
Let me pose this question. There's a few, the question of accountability. And, you know, I hear your remarks about not going so fast, but going right. This question is about the Public Police Accountability Board, and how will you make certain that that body is hearing from? Are there mechanisms within that to hear from residents and hear from students and those who might be affected by the presence of an armed police force?
Yes. So the one of the legislative responsibilities of the JHPD Accountability Board is to be the community feedback mechanism. And they're required to meet quarterly, but they've already, as we've had several meetings, they've already indicated a desire to meet much more frequently than that. And that's great, actually, because for this to be done right and for it to be effective, we're going to need that continual community engagement. Is something that I've learned over the course of a long career that's invaluable. And it's not just voices that are in agreement with me. It's voices of, you know, of all thought processes. I've found throughout my long career that the advocate point of view helps to influence and produce a better product that I put out. I found that the consensus comes from a mutual desire to be protected. So I'm relying heavily on the accountability board. But not just the accountability board. We have a student advisory group, and we have other mechanisms to get community feedback. I've been in more than, I want to say, over 130 stakeholder meetings, and you know, I'm committed to continuing that process. So if you have an event, if you want to talk to me, invite me, and I'll do my best to come. This isn't going to be, I'm not going to be a shrinking flower. I'm going to be there. You know, I have a history of doing that. And so I welcome working with the community in all aspects and our stakeholders in every sense of that word.
No, just on that point, thank you for coming out to the expungement clinic and spending a lot of time with us and the stakeholders there. few weeks ago. Let me ask this question about accountability again. And thank you all for continuing to put your questions in the chat. We are about to wrap up, but I think I have time for all the questions that are in the chat that are coming in and the ones that are just coming in the last few minutes. Do you think about, how are you thinking about people who will be a part of the accountability system, or how do you define accountability, and differentiate that maybe between those who may be advisors to you or advisors on the public safety portfolio? Is there a difference in your mind between those two? I got that question twice, so I just wanted to pose it to you. Do you have any insight on that?
So I heard it as kind of broad, which is, but so if you're talking about the JHPD Accountability Board, the legislature set them up in an advisory function. But I already have told them that, I consider them to be a strong advisory board. So to the extent that what they advise me to do is in line with 21st century policing, that it is in line with the ACLU's model policies to avoid racial injustices and best practices, I'm gonna do what they say. So let's just put that there. If you mean in terms of holding individuals accountable if they deviate from policy, well, we're going to make sure that we do that as well, and that those processes are transparent. The Johns Hopkins Police Department has to set up a hearing board. It has to have civilian involvement, and I got no interest in having a cloaked process.
And the accountability board members, they are volunteers; they're not paid.
And thanks for that question, Alicia. And I should have went into more detail about how the accountability board is comprised. Sure. So the legislation requires that the accountability board is a 15-member board. One member coming from each of the campuses, Homewood, Peabody, and East Baltimore, the community, and no affiliation with JHPD, with the university. And then one appointed by the mayor and one appointed by the city council president. And then 10 members of faculty, staff, and students, one of which has to be a member of the Black Faculty Association, Black Faculty and Staff Association. Mm-hmm. So of these 15 members, all but the mayors and city council presidents appointee have to be approved by the full Senate. So they go through a rigorous vetting process from the application stage, where they are rated blindly by a panel of university personnel, and then once they're recommended for appointment to the board, that requires a full Senate approval. We just had 5 members go through that process and 5 vacancies filled. Those individuals, and they've been approved by the full Senate during the last 2 weeks of the session. Those individuals begin their work in the fall of 2022. And so that's another reason why starting the earnest discussions around the MOU process are better held in the fall of this year.
Excellent. Let me ask 2 questions as we conclude. We have about 4 minutes, so I'm going to give you these 2 in rapid fire. One is probably going to take a little longer. And this question is about a hypothetical, and a hypothetical based on a real life situation that happened here, I think just about 2 weeks ago, involving a young man named Donnell Rochester, who was unfortunately shot and killed by police during an altercation. The question that was posed is, if faced with a similar situation, how would Hopkins respond if that were that were posed to us? I always stay away from hypotheticals. I'm a lawyer, so usually hypotheticals mean I'm in a test. So I usually stay away from hypotheticals. But I pose that to you, Dr. Bard.
No, and I get it, and I understand the spirit of the question. Yeah. So the factual basis is that investigations into the use of deadly force by law enforcement here in the state of Maryland are the responsibility of the Attorney General's office. What I'll just say and commit to as being as open and transparent and as providing as much information as possible from the outset and ongoing through any incident that would occur should one of our officers use deadly force.
Mm-hmm. This last question is the public process for discussing the MOU. Do you have a sense of how much time that will take?
Do I have a sense of how much time that will be?
Yes, how much time will it take?
However long it takes. However long it takes. The focus is on getting it right and making sure that folks are engaged in that process. Not on doing it as quick as possible. So however long it takes.
Excellent. Let me say this. I think that is all the questions that have been posed. I really did get through them, and thank you, Dr. Bard, for answering all those questions. Any final thoughts that you wanted to say as we close out this public safety town hall? Thank you for your candor. Thank you to Sarah, and thank you to Provost Kumar for his remarks as well. But any remarks, any things that you want to say as we close out?
No, I just want to assure the community that we're doing everything we can in real time to ensure that there's the highest degree of safety on the campus. Right now, that necessitates, and it will always necessitate, continual engagement and relentless follow-up with BPD. As we become more independent with law enforcement resources, then I know we'll have more time to investigate small incidents that occur that our counterparts in BPD might not have, but we're not there yet. So we'll continue to do everything within our power to make sure that our campuses are safe, and then we'll make sure that while we try to enhance that safety, that we never encroach on the feeling of welcomeness on our campus as well.
Well, let me say thank you for what you have done. Thank you in advance for what you will do. And thank you for being here. Thank you all for being here, for your direct and candid questions. And thank you all for participating in this public safety town hall today.
Thank you.